In fact, there's a boy who was in college who wrote you a poem once, and in his poem he said, "Roses are red, violets are blue. When I was a kid, I got spanked because of you." And I was that boy. No, I'm not kidding. I'm a little too old for that.
There's a whole generation
yeah,
that would like to catch me in a blind alley somewhere.
Hi everybody and welcome back to my channel. I am Jen and this is Funky Fridays, and here on my channel I talk about different aspects of Christian fundamentalism while doing my makeup. I am joined by my co-host Lippie here today, and hopefully she won't get into anything too graphic back there, but let's begin. Today we will be discussing Dr. James Dobson, founder of the highly influential Christian media conglomerate Focus on the Family, along with the right-wing lobbyist juggernaut, the Family Research Council. Dobson himself may not be a familiar face to the secular world as, say, Jerry Falwell or Pat Robertson, but Dobson is just as highly respected and revered in the evangelical community. He used his inconspicuous nature to do a lot of conservative dirty work behind the scenes and to act as an invisible hand, guiding the larger culture towards his own vision of a conservative Christian utopia. Dobson is largely responsible for the modern relationship between American conservatives and evangelical Christianity. Although he doesn't quite look the part, Dobson was instrumental in advancing the rugged Christian male into the forefront of conservative political ideology. And he managed to do it all while claiming not-for-profit status for his organizations. I don't know why I didn't mention this at the start of the video, but today's episode was chosen by my lovely patrons of the official Fundie Fridays fan club. If you would like to vote on episode topics once a month, follow me on Patreon. It's only $3 a month, and there are some cool bonus videos that I have made just for patrons too. And speaking of supporting the channel, here's a word from today's episode sponsor. I am proud to announce that today's episode is sponsored by my friends over at Surfshark VPN. You may have seen a VPN or two advertised by your favorite YouTubers, and that's because VPNs are actually a very important tool that everybody who uses the internet should have. After all, even if you are using your browser's incognito mode, your internet service provider can still spy on you. So by using a virtual private network, or VPN, is the most effective way to ensure your privacy. And I just so happen to have the hookup for you for 83% off a 2-year plan plus 3 extra months. That's right, if you go to surfshark.deals/Fundie Fridays and use my code Fundie Fridays, you can snatch this deal for yourself. You can use Surfshark on an unlimited number of devices, something that my boyfriend and I take advantage of with our laptops, consoles, phones, and desktops. VPNs are also useful for browsing region-locked content, and with Surfshark's over 3,000 servers in 65 countries, there are unlimited possibilities. The folks at Surfshark care about security so much that they created a VPN that secures your data with industry-leading measures by using uncrackable encryption and the most secure VPN protocols. Now, I'm not a scientist, so I don't know what that means, but I am a child of the internet, and I know there is some sketchy stuff out there, and there are people who want to steal your data. So, by using Surfshark and my code Fundie Fridays, you can protect yourself today and also get 83% off a 2-year plan plus those 3 extra months. So make sure you go to surfshark.deals/Fundie Fridays to check out this awesome deal. Now back to our regularly scheduled programming. And before we officially begin the episode, I want to shout out several sources that I used because they were very, very helpful. We've got the Behind the Bastards podcast, educational and hilarious as always. This article from 5280, I have used a lot of stuff from. And of course, my current obsession is Jesus and John Wayne, How White Evangelicals Corrupted a Faith and Fractured a Nation by Kristen Cobus-Dumay. And I recommend this book to every single viewer of this channel because if you like the kind of stuff that we talk about on this channel, then you will definitely love hearing about the history behind all of it. So, highly recommend this book. And throughout this whole thing, I'm comparing Jerry Falwell to James Dobson, and this is because, honestly, it is really hard to find someone else to compare him to based on social magnitude alone. But I need you to understand, as influential as Jerry Falwell was, he wasn't shit compared to James Dobson. If Jerry Falwell made God a Republican, then James Dobson made Jesus a misogynist. James Dobson was born to Myrtle and James C. Dobson Sr. on April 21st, 1936 in Shreveport, Louisiana. Later on in his life, his family moved to Oklahoma, and then Dobson eventually settled in California for college. Dobbs was an only child, and it is reported that he was very talkative and opinionated. No comment on that one. Dobson was also a fourth-generation holy man coming from a family of Church of Nazarene ministers. Religion was a big part of Dobson's life from the very beginning, and he recalls that he could pray before he could speak, and having a powerful religious experience at age 3. Weeping and crying, the 3-year-old boy knelt and asked Jesus to forgive his sins and instantly felt the overwhelming presence of God. Imagine the King of the universe, creator of all heaven and earth, caring about an insignificant kid, barely out of toddlerhood. It makes no sense, but I know it happened, Dobson would say. With his born-again experience, James Dobson was on his way to fulfilling a family prophecy. His great-grandfather had told the family that he received a message from God informing him that 4 generations of his family would rise up and serve the Lord. The Dobsons were members of the Nazarene Church, a denomination of evangelical Christianity that believes human beings are inherently evil but can be saved if they repent and put their faith in Jesus Christ. Followers believe fervently in Judgment Day, when the Lord will return to earth. The dead will be raised and the faithful will be reunited with their loved ones in heaven. Nazarenes believe that after a person has had an initial born-again experience, the Holy Spirit will seek to perform a second work of grace called entire sanctification, or baptism with the Holy Spirit, which purges all sin. A former focus on the family executive writes in his 1997 book that his, quote, holiness principle is key to understanding Dobson's worldview. James Dobson believes that he has been entirely sanctified, morally perfected, and he does not and cannot sin. Now you know why he and moralists like him make a life of condemning what he believes to be the sins of others. He thinks he's perfect. I know it looks crazy right now, but trust the vision. This is going to be really cool by the end. At least I hope it will. One of James Dobson's more famous ideological tenets is the power of corporal punishment. And he loves to tell stories of his childhood where he fondly recalls being hit. And if I had to read that, so do you. Myrtle Dobson was an amiable and social woman, but she didn't hesitate to whack her son with a shoe or belt when she felt it required. Consequently, Dobson writes, he learned at an early age to stay out of striking distance when he backtalked his mother. One day he made the mistake of mouthing off when she was only 4 feet away and heard a 16-pound girdle whistling through the air. The intended blow caught me across the chest, followed by a multitude of straps and buckles wrapping themselves around my midsection. Dobson also recalls fond memories of wrestling with his dad, and I'm not going to make anything weird about that because Fundie Fridays is wholesome family programming. I will note, however, that his affinity for combat sports is kind of interesting because his son, Ryan Dobson, actually used to run a Christian MMA ministry. I know. And despite looking like the one punk under God himself, Jay Baker, Ryan is actually a Bible-thumping conservative, just like his dear old dad. James Dobson felt compelled as a young man to enter the world of psychology and attended Pasadena College, which is now called Point Loma Nazarene University, as an undergraduate and served as captain of the school's tennis team. In August of 1960, he married his wife Shirley, with his father officiating. To pay the bills, both he and his wife worked as elementary school teachers, with James working long hours on the weekend to finish his master's degree. In an attempt to avoid the draft, James Dobson joined the National Guard and served for 6 months. Were you scared of Vietnam, buddy? That doesn't seem very rugged of you. And you know, this really falls in line with the time-honored fundamentalist tradition of glamorizing the military but never actually serving. And yes, I'm talking to you, Bill Gothard, you and your weird Bible Scouts for wayward Christian boys. And yes, I do have my hands on the precious, and we're going to play with it. James Dobson soon rose through the ranks of academia, joining the staff of Children's Hospital Los Angeles in 1966, receiving a PhD in child development from USC in 1967, and landing prestigious position as an associate clinical professor of pediatrics at the USC School of Medicine in 1969. So everything changed in 1970 when James Dobson published his prolific parenting advice book, Dare to Discipline. Also, like Bill Gothard, watch my video about him, Dobson was obsessed with patriarchal leadership and felt that the solution to the baby boomers' unrest and rebellion was to submit to authority and straighten up. Dobson said, "Respect for leadership is the glue that holds social organization together. Without it, there is chaos, violence, and insecurity for everyone. Parental permissiveness was the last thing children needed in such tumultuous times. In shorthand, if you beat them, they will obey." I'm paraphrasing here, of course, but that's what Dobson and Bill Gothard advocated for. A cruel philosophy where children have wills that need to be broken and defiant toddlers who are being sinful. They reinforce it under the guise of tough love, framing non-violent parents as soft and damaging. But please make no mistake, this is abuse, plain as day. In Dare to Discipline, published in 1970, Dobson tells parents it's okay to spank their little ones as long as it's done in a loving, careful environment. The best place to spank a child is on the buttocks, he writes, recommending a neutral object such as a switch or paddle. The physical discipline can begin with a thump to the fingers, just enough to sting, when the toddler is 18 months old, and it should stop by the time the child is 10 or 12. Teens should never be spanked, he advises, because it provokes great resentment and doesn't work anyway. Yeah, we really need to break our children's wills so they can grow up to psychologically torture waitstaff. Really important work. Dare to Discipline became a bestseller, with over 4.5 million copies having been sold. Dobson published other popular books, including Hide or Seek in 1974, followed by What Wives Wish Their Husbands Knew About Women, and The Strong-Willed Child. I'll give you one guess as to what that one's about. As one might expect at this point, Dobson has a very contentious relationship with the LGBTQIA community. And in 2015, he made this really dramatic video talking about all these horrible things that were going to happen to society if gay marriage was legalized.
I'm James Dobson, and I appreciate you attending the press conference. I'm unable to be there myself today, but my colleagues have asked me to address you briefly by way of this video. Collectively, we want to express some profound concerns and beliefs about the decision the Supreme Court will soon render regarding the definition or redefinition of marriage. If the U.S. Supreme Court redefines marriage to include same-sex marriage, we all know, you and I all know, that this will not be the end of the matter. An avalanche of court cases will be filed on related issues that we can't even imagine today. We believe, or should I say, I believe, that religious liberty will be assaulted from every side. Indeed, that has already happened. Pastors may have to officiate at same-sex marriages, and they could be prohibited from preaching certain passages of Scripture. Those who refuse to comply will likely be threatened legally, and as the years go by, some will be subjected to prison sentences. Christians who operate businesses will be required to dance to the government's tune. We've all seen examples of photographers and bakeries and pizza parlors being required to serve at gay weddings, whether they want to or not, whether they have convictions about it or not. And they have to on penalty of closure or bankruptcy. Christian colleges may be unable to teach scriptural views of marriage and sexual relationships. Accrediting bodies will tell them it's the law of the land, or so say some judges. I'm most concerned about what the courts will require of parents and their children. A few weeks ago, President Obama actually asked the legislators to prohibit parents from seeking professional therapy from state-licensed counselors who would help their children deal with sexual identity crises. What business does this man have in telling parents how to help their confused and disoriented kids, especially those who may have been abused sexually? This is outrageous. In some states, counselors have already lost their licenses for trying to help troubled children in this way. Now, these and other concerns that I could list, my time is gone, are why we have called this press conference. The U.S. Constitution does not grant the judiciary the authority to interfere with religious liberties, with parental rights, and with the institutions of marriage and the family. Here we stand, and we will not go where the U.S. courts seek to take us.
You know, if your so-called institution is able to be taken out by a couple of gay people getting married, then maybe it wasn't that great to begin with. In 1973, James Dobson voluntarily left the American Psychological Association after they had removed homosexuality as a mental disorder. It's a shame that's the hill you want to die on, buddy. Dobson still holds a grudge to this day against the APA, by the way. Yeah, I wouldn't be citing Jordan Peterson if you want to be taken seriously. This did not affect his audience's admiration for him, though. In fact, it increased it. Dobson was seen as standing up for Christian parents' right to corporal punishment. A hero we don't need for problems that we made up. How very American. Without Dobson's advice, our daughters might grow up immodest, husbandless, and working the Sunday shift at the abortion store.
No, I made a huge mistake one time. I was at Children's Hospital, and a young woman wanted to see me professionally, and she came in, and she had a 2-year-old who had been born out of wedlock. She was struggling as a single mother, and she was pregnant again. And she came to tell me that she was going to abort the baby. And I did everything I could to talk her out of that. I gave the whole pro-life message. And she said, no, I've already got one child I can't take care of, and I'm going to have another. And so then she told me, in fact, I have an appointment at one of the hospitals in town. Yeah. Will you take me there? And I drove her there and let her out. And I've had that on my conscience ever since. Yeah. That would rank very high. I'm disappointed with myself.
After Dobson left the hospital, he started to pursue other ventures, including, and I kid you not, showing up and speaking at random PTA meetings, of which his children did not go to that school. Paging Dr. Karen. I know. Watch me put more on my face. In 1977, Dobson was pulling in as much as $24,000 to $36,000 during weekend seminars, which he called Focus on the Family. He directed these earnings into a nonprofit tax-exempt organization that he and his wife organized, and they called it, you guessed it, Focus on the Family. Around this time, Dobson was hard at work producing child-rearing materials, with one of them being the famous series, Where's Dad?
And you lose that opportunity when you're never home, when you're exhausted when you're there, when you're carrying a briefcase full of work, when you're irritable because you're so fatigued. And I see this as a tremendous tool, a tremendous barrier to everything that we care about. You know, I'm not the only one to have a concern at that point. You do not even have to have a Christian perspective to have those same views. And in fact, there was a song that was popular. I think it's one of the most creative of all popular songs I've ever heard, because it goes to the heart of the American way of life. And I have the words here before me. I'm not going to sing it to you, or we just clear the auditorium out. The name of the song is Cats in the Cradle. It's written by a fellow named Harry Chapin. I do not know Harry Chapin, but I know that he knows what I'm talking about today, because he could not have written the words of this song if he didn't know something about it. He said, my child arrived just the other day. He came to the world in the usual way, but there were planes to catch and bills to pay. He learned to walk while I was away, and he was talking before I knew it. And as he grew, he'd say, I'm going to be like you, Dad. You know I'm going to be like you.
And you know that I had to add music to that.
Well, my son turned 10 just the other day. He said, thanks for the ball, Dad. Come on, let's play. Can you teach me to throw? I said, not today. I got a lot to do. He said, that's okay. And he walked away, but his smile never dimmed. It said, I'm going to be like him. Yeah. You know I'm going to be like him. And the cat's in the cradle, and the silver spoon, the little boy blue and the man in the moon. When you coming home, Dad? Well, I don't know when, but we'll get together then, son. You know we'll have a good time then.
Dobson has never really been known for his nuanced opinions, so it was not a surprise when he started talking about gender roles so obsessively. And this next part is all from that book, Jesus and John Wayne, and I know it's a big block of text, but I really think it is worth listening to. In 1975, Dobson took it upon himself to articulate the critical difference between men and women. Males and females differ biochemically, anatomically, and emotionally, he asserted. In truth, they are unique in every cell of their bodies. He portrayed the distinction in stark terms. Men like to hunt and fish and hike in the wilderness, while women preferred to stay at home and wait for them. Men played sports as women watched, yawning on the sidelines. But perhaps the most profound difference between men and women, according to Dobson, was their source of self-esteem. Together with a woman's vulnerability and need to be loved, it was a mistake to tamper with the time-honored relationship of husband as loving protector and wife as recipient of that protection.
Because that's how men develop self-worth.
Yeah.
Is that they've done something with their lives.
Yeah.
I'm that way, you're that way, I think men are that way. Women, by contrast, draw their self-worth from relationships, from romantic love, from being loved and being cared for. And that's something that men frequently don't know about women. Well, why is she complaining? I know I'm working long hours, but I'm doing it for her. Well, take another look, brother, because she needs something else from you.
Yeah.
She needs your love, your attention, your time. So I talked about that in What Wives Which Their Husbands Knew About Women.
Dobson championed distinct gender roles and identities for the sake of marriages, but also for the sake of the nation. We must not abandon the biblical concept of masculinity and femininity at the delicate stage of our national history, Dobson implored. Writing in 1975, he had asserted that the future of the nation depended without question on how it sees its women. He denounced the feminist propaganda behind the media depictions of women as tough, albeit gorgeous, figures who could dismantle any man alive with her karate chops and flying kicks to the teeth. He blamed feminists for calling into question everything traditionally masculine, and for tampering with the time-honored roles of protector and protected. Most perniciously, they had denigrated masculine leadership as macho, leaving men in confusion and the nation in peril. Drawing on the work of economist George Gilder, Dobson described what was at stake when society abandoned the beauty of the divine plan. A man was supposed to fall in love with a woman and then protect and support her. When millions of families followed this plan, the nation remained strong and stable. If men failed to follow this course, ruination was inevitable. When men didn't harness their energies in support of the home, then drug abuse, alcoholism, sexual intrigue, job instability, and aggressive behavior can be expected to be unchecked throughout the culture. What was needed was a call to arms, a return to the traditional masculine role as prescribed in the Good Book. Dobson knew he was out of step with prevailing trends, but he was unapologetic. If this be macho, sexist, chauvinist, and stereotypical, then I'm guilty as charged. Please address all hate mail to my secretary, who has a special file prepared for it. Dobson would play a critical role in mustering the forces of the religious right, but he was able to mobilize American evangelicals so effectively precisely because he did not appear to be doing so, at least not initially. His folksy style stood in stark contrast to the fire and brimstone approach of preachers who dominated the religious airwaves. Even his appearance suggested a friendly, harmless demeanor. With his blonde hair, blue eyes, gentle smile, and lanky figure, and his California address, Dobson coated his patriarchal teachings with a modern veneer. Early on, Dobson took great pains to appear apolitical. He knew that his authority was as a dispenser of domestic advice, and he was careful not to alienate listeners with strident political messaging, particularly the housewives who turned in for practical childrearing tips. He was merely offering help to uncertain parents, and what parents haven't faced uncertainty when it comes to raising children.
I represent an organization called Focus on the Family, which a 3-year-old one time called Poke Us in the Fanny. And, that's not far off from what we're trying to do in some ways.
Dobson was careful, too, not to appear to usurp the role of local churches. Instead, he worked alongside them, offering weekly bulletin inserts, video series, and other resources for churches to distribute to their members. The organization avoided divisive theological issues, and tuning in required no conversion experience, statement of faith, or claims of exclusivity. Evangelicals of all stripes turned to Dobson for advice, as did mainline Protestants and Catholics. Through books, newsletters, and especially radio, Dobson became a fixture in the homes and lives of tens of millions of Americans. As one faithful listener described, Focus on the Family was so knitted into the fabric of my thinking and beliefs that it's hard for us to pick it out now, because it has become so much a part of us. By 1987, Focus on the Family had developed into a full-blown evangelical media empire with a budget of around $34 million. By 1995, the budget surpassed $100 million. By the 2000s, Dobson's radio show aired on around 2,000 stations, reaching 6 to 10 million weekly listeners. He had amassed a mailing list of over 2 million addresses, and his organization had launched its own publishing house. For both Dobson and Gothard, the problems of the modern family and its society writ large could be traced to the erosion of patriarchal power. Within both separatist and respectable wings of modern evangelicism, then a shared defense of patriarchy continued an emerging cultural identity into a growing commitment to political activism. Over time, this alliance would begin to dictate the boundaries of evangelicalism itself. Aww, am I the cutest thing you've ever seen? The answer is yes. And I do have another really terrible quote from him. In the 1980s, Dobson had recommended a healthy skepticism towards certain allegations of domestic violence. In Love Must Be Tough from 1983, he warned of women who deliberately baited their husbands into hitting them, verbally antagonizing them until they get the prize they sought, a bruise they could parade around before neighbors, friends, and the law, to gain a moral advantage and perhaps to also justify an otherwise unbiblical escape from marriage through divorce. This argument remained unchanged until the 1996 edition of the book. Such blatant victim blaming. It's no wonder that Dobson got along with Ted Bundy. Oh, you haven't heard? James Dobson secured the final interview with famous serial killer Ted Bundy in 1989.
Ted, outside these walls right now, there are several hundred reporters that wanted to talk to you.
Yeah.
And you asked me to come here from California because you had something you wanted to say. This hour that we have together is not just an interview with a man who's scheduled to die tomorrow morning. I am here and you're here because of this message that you're talking about right here. You really feel that hardcore pornography and the doorway to it, softcore pornography, is doing untold damage to other people and causing other women to be abused and killed the way you did others.
Listen, I'm no social scientist, and I haven't done a survey. I mean, I don't pretend that I know what John Q. Citizen thinks about this. But I've lived in prison for a long time now. And I've met a lot of men who were motivated to commit violence just like me. And without exception, every one of them was deeply involved in pornography, without question, without exception. Deeply influenced and consumed by an addiction to pornography. There's no question about it. The FBI's own study on serial homicide shows that the most common interest among serial killers is pornography.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's real. It's true.
Ted, what would your life have been like without that influence? You can only speculate.
Yeah. Well, I know it would have been far better, not just for me, and it's, excuse me for being so self-centered here. It would have been a lot better for me and lots of other people. I know that. Lots of other innocent people, victims and families. It would have been a lot better. There's no question, but it would have been a fuller life. Certainly a life that would not have involved, I'm absolutely certain, would not have involved this kind of violence that I have committed.
You know, no one's denying that the porn industry is fucked up and that lots of people have been hurt by it. But I don't believe for a minute that it was violent 70s pornography that made Ted Bundy kill all those people. Call me a skeptic, I know. My gut tells me that Bundy just wanted to troll the world one last time. Focus on the Family published the video, which was technically free to use, with stupid stipulations like no editing any portion of the video. So that meant if the news wanted to play the interview, they had to play the whole thing or pay up. And I was slightly worried that I would get in trouble for playing that clip, but nothing has happened so far, so keep me in your prayers. Dobson kept all the money to himself, around $1 million, and then after some backlash, he later donated $600,000 of it to anti-porn groups, including his own group. So charitable donations to yourself, the ultimate capitalist fantasy. Dobson said, "It's interesting that I come off bad in comparison with a man who killed 28 women and children. I mean, I need a new press agent, I suppose, under those circumstances," he said ruefully. "The negative stories only hardened his indifferent attitude toward the media. I say what I believe and let the chips fall where they may." You know, Dobson sure hates porn, but he completely stole MindGeek's gig. Focus on the Family has been collecting and selling members' data for years. If only they had Surfshark. So this is the final look. I'm obsessed with it. As you can see, I'm trying to be a mushroom. I'm not just putting little dots all over my face. And this shirt is available on Bonfire, so you can live the mushroom fantasy with me. In the 80s, Dobson became a regular consultant to Ronald Reagan. And I'm sure you can see where this is going. He was appointed as a co-chair of Citizens for Tax Reform, the National Advisory Committee to the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, the Advisory Boards on Missing Children, the Committee of Preventing Teen Pregnancy, really just anything that he could make worse by having his name on it.
Because look at Gaga. She's the creative director of Polaroid. I like some of the Gaga songs. What the fuck does she know about cameras?
By the mid-1980s, Dobson's TV program was playing on over 800 stations and was massively popular. Dobson was bigger than ever and sought to expand his political reach even further. In 1981, he founded the Family Research Council, which was founded for the purpose of conservative policy research organization to support pro-family policies. And just a reminder, this is a hate group, and yes, Josh Duggar did work for them. The Family Research Council, or the FRC, is an American Christian conservative lobbying organization that advances the now standard evangelical positions of anti-choice, anti-queer, and anti-vax. The FRC mostly got through a lot of smaller little bills that had to do with things like taxes, and that was smart of Dobson because people didn't notice these things. FRC has lobbied in favor of DOMA, and in some cases taking things all the way to the Supreme Court. All evidence available indicates that they still support conversion therapy as late as 2018, and they acted as a key supporter of the harsh 2012 Ugandan anti-gay legislations that put thousands of people in jeopardy. For more information on that, watch this video. Much of their legislation runs through FRC Action, which is a political action committee or a PAC. So what a PAC does is it represents a political cause or a special interest, and they collect donations from individuals who support said causes. And people are allowed to donate anonymously and as much money as they want, which is why it's very shady. PACs are not required to publish or make any public information about their donors, which is why they are associated with the concept of dark money. And it's essentially political money laundering. PACs operate under less political restriction than organizations like ministries, which is why FRC Action was able to use former chairman Josh Duggar to actively speak in favor of anti-abortion causes without risking their tax-exempt status. In 1981, Dobson was invited to join a secretive organization called the Council for National Policy, a coalition of powerful Republicans who want to cut taxes, shrink the government, and make the United States into more of a God-fearing nation. Founded in 1981, the still active CNP membership included some of the biggest names of the religious right, ardent gun rights supporters, billionaires, beltway strategists, politicians, fundraising gurus, and a sprinkling of ex-John Birchers. In the invitation-only club, members are instructed to not talk about the meetings nor reveal the names of their colleagues. Recent speakers have included Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, and George W. Bush, according to the watchdog group Americans United for the Separation of Church and State. From the beginning, the group writes, the CNP sought to merge two strains of far-right thought, the theocratic religious right with the low-tax anti-government wing of the GOP. The theory was that the religious right would provide the grassroots activism and the muscle, the other faction would put up the money. Yes, that is very true. Those two groups are now best friends, so here we are. In 1983, Army Chief of Staff General John A. Wickham Jr. asked Dobson to spearhead a campaign to inculcate evangelical family values within the military. To do so, they had troops listen to the famous Where's Dad tape from earlier in the video. You know, the Cats in the Cradle one. The next year, Wickham invited Dobson to the Spring Commanders Conference at the Pentagon, where Dobson gave a talk on the importance of traditional home life values for officers and their wives. The following year, Wickham arranged for the distribution of Dobson's Where's Dad video throughout the Army. All 780,000 active duty soldiers were expected to view the film, and it served as the building block for the Army's entire family action plan. Is that really FAP? Oh my god. Okay. Military scrubbed all overtly religious language from the video, but the family values ideology remained intact. Dobson believed that the fate of the family and the nation depended on men taking up proper leadership roles. Folks, if America is going to survive, it will be because thousands of fathers begin to put their families at the highest level of priorities and reserve something of their time, effort, and energy for the leaderships within their own home. Wickham concurred. The readiness of our army is directly related to the strength of our families, he attested. The stronger the family, the stronger the army, because strong families improve our combat readiness. Their partnership paid dividends for both men. Dobson was able to expand his influence throughout the military and tap new distribution networks. Neither the Army nor Dobson's publisher would disclose how much the Army paid for Where's Dad, all while enhancing his own image by playing up his military ties. In turn, Dobson helped burnish the image of the military. In 1984, Focus on the Family magazine published a cover story on Dobson's work with the Army and brought Wickham and the other military leaders on Dobson's daily radio program. The next year, the magazine ran another article praising Wickham's pro-family stance. Dobson made sure to send Wickham a copy, noting that it had been distributed to 650,000 people on their mailing list. Reaching millions of regular listeners, Dobson helped rehabilitate Americans' view of the military in the post-Vietnam era. We've been led to believe the military generals and admirals are egocentric maniacs who are itching to blow up the world, he wrote in a Focus on the Family newsletter. Nothing could be further from the truth. Commanders like Wickham were dedicated patriots who have sacrificed dearly for their country. The military was a noble institution. In 1991, Dobson moved his organization's headquarters from California to Colorado Springs. Side note, Colorado Springs is now becoming a fundamentalist hotbed, and it has even been referred to as the Vatican for Protestants. And it doesn't help that Dobson compared the founding of his headquarters in Colorado to the building of the Temple of Jerusalem. The Focus on the Family headquarters is so huge that it actually has its own zip code. When I said Protestant Vatican, I meant it. By 1995, Focus on the Family was pulling in millions of dollars a year, and they had 10 million weekly listeners by the year 2000. Dobson's philosophies became such a part of the evangelical zeitgeist that they seem inseparable from any other Christian doctrine. For Gen X and younger, this stuff really became a part of Christianity as they knew it. Focus on the Family was so prominent and vital to evangelical culture that they are responsible for more of your childhood nostalgia than you probably remember. Does this show ring a bell to you? I watched a lot of these episodes, and I'm going to say that there was not enough Jesus in these episodes. I can't believe that some of your parents let you watch this stuff.
I can blow you out of the sky at any time I choose. We both know that.
You're bluffing, Bernstein.
Am I? Fertig. Jawohl, kommen drin.
I'm here, son. I'm right here. Whit, would you go get my wife and the doctor, please? They're right out in the hall.
Of course. Thank you, Lord.
And if you're a fan of Adventures in Odyssey, you probably already know that it is incredibly popular and it is still running to this day. And who could forget McGhee Me?
I was going home. Not that way, you don't. Sure, I just live over on the other side. Man, what are you thinking? No one cuts through there. Why not? He's a crazy Indian, man. He eats live animals.
Did he just say what I think he said? At least this song is a banger. It's just one little lie. The other major thing about James Dobson, besides Focus on the Family and FRC, is Rub One Out, Love One Out, was founded in 1998 and it was actually a traveling conference under the Exodus International umbrella. Love Went Out held at least 52 seminars in the US, including one in Anchorage, Alaska, that garnered national media attention because Sarah Palin's church, Wasilla Bible, advertised it. Personally, I just find it odd that people would go all the way to Alaska just to talk about not being gay anymore. I won't even go outside to get the mail if it's too cold. At these conferences, speakers would give speeches and testimonies about finding freedom from their gay condition through Christ.
This individual didn't choose his sexual orientation, but I would argue, well, many of us, perhaps in our 40s, 50s, 60s, 80s, still retain deeply ingrained feelings we didn't ask for. That doesn't necessarily legitimize the feelings. It is entirely possible to have a long-held tendency that is inherently sinful. So the fact that it is long-held and involuntary certainly doesn't legitimize it. None of us would deny the worthwhile contributions many homosexual people make to our culture. There is another option. Many of us, myself included, have chosen it.
The support group that I started attending was called Homosexuals Anonymous. You know, on the one hand, I was really embarrassed to go the first time I went. I didn't really know any gay people, any homosexuals, and I didn't know what to expect at a support group like this. But on the other hand, I felt relieved and grateful to find that there were Christians who struggled like I did. Homosexuals Anonymous, in their own words, is a fellowship of men and women who through their common emotional experience have chosen to help each other live in freedom from homosexuality. Now, I didn't know anything about step programs, except that I knew that most of them had 12 steps, and Homosexuals Anonymous, HA, had 14 steps. And I thought initially, you know, maybe that's because we're extra special, or because this sin is extra hard and we just need a little bit more help than anyone else does. But that's not the real reason. We came to perceive that we had accepted a lie about ourselves, an illusion that had trapped us in a false identity. And for me, this was life-changing. I had spent so much time trying to suppress homosexual thoughts and feelings, trying desperately to not be gay. This had become a major focus of my thinking. And God used this step to begin to destroy that lie from the enemy, that my attractions gave me my identity. We learned to claim our true reality, that as humankind we are part of God's heterosexual creation, and that God calls us to rediscover that identity in Him through Jesus Christ as our faith perceives Him. What I began to understand was that homosexuality was not who I was. And as my thinking began changing about who I was, I thought, you know, I probably need to date some women. So I took a few different girls out, and in my misguided zeal, I would tell them almost immediately on the first date about some of my struggles with same-sex attractions and how God was setting me free. It's not a technique I recommend for the first date. Spilling all your deepest, darkest secrets and sins. And fortunately, these women were healthy enough to run quickly, nicely, in the opposite direction. Marriage is not proof of my healing. There are plenty of men who marry who have same-sex attractions. But for me, marriage was a gift from the Father. And marriage doesn't mean that I've never had any attractions to men, or to women for that matter. I just choose not to identify myself by those attractions and not to act on them. And the attractions have really, really diminished and dissipated over time. And just as marriage is not proof of healing, neither is having children. There are plenty of broken people who have children. But again, God blessed us. He gave us 3 sons.
So, what are the signs that someone should look out for if they have a gay loved one?
They would begin with prenatal characteristics or inborn characteristics. Most people who believe in the developmental theory do believe that many of us are born with personality structures that can make us more susceptible to homosexuality later in life if other factors come into play. What might those characteristics be? They might include sensitivity, creativity, compliance, preference for intellectual or artistic pursuits over athletics.
Fellas, is it gay to be sensitive, intelligent, and creative? John Polk, the founder of Love Went Out / chairman of the board at Exodus, gained notoriety for his compelling ex-gay testimony. Polk would go on later to be photographed at a gay bar in the year 2000, and he said that he was just using the bathroom and he didn't know that it was a gay bar. Polk finally left Focus on the Family in 2003, and get this, he was on Cutthroat Kitchen in 2005, and in 2013 he and his wife divorced and he started to advocate against the ex-gay movement. And apparently his wife is not supportive, and I think she's still claiming to be ex-gay. Some of you might recognize John Polk from the recent Netflix documentary Pray Away. In June of 2013, Exodus International President Alan Chambers announced that they were going to disband the ministry. He even offered an apology to the gay community and reversed his stance on the teachings of Exodus International. For more info on conversion therapy, watch my video. But the long and short of it being, conversion therapy is a type of fake therapy, pretty much, that attempts to convert someone's sexual orientation or gender identity through, I would call it torture, what they put them through. Many people have ended their lives over the horrific things that they had to endure during conversion therapy. And the ex-gay movement exacerbates this problem because they are perpetuating the lie that being gay is A, bad, and B, changeable. In 2003, James Dobson left Focus on the Family, allegedly, supposedly, because he wanted to be more involved in politics, and Donald P. Hodel became the president and chief executive officer. Also in 2003, at a rally where Roy Moore, famous pedophile, was trying to keep the Ten Commandments statue at a courthouse, James Dobson had this to say: "I came here to make a statement of what we believe. We're in a great moral struggle of our own. It can be said that people of faith are being sent to the back of the bus, and we're not going to go there." In 2005, Jim Daly took over Focus on the Family, and in 2010, Dobson founded Family Talk, a non-profit organization, and launched a new radio broadcast, Family Talk with Dr. James Dobson, and airs on over 300 stations nationwide. Dobson continued making just offensive statements over the last 20 years, and Focus on the Family and FRC Action have been in everybody's business, trying to make it illegal to be gay or a woman or a gay woman, and it's just been terrible. The most recent thing that I can think of is Mike Pence's weird fascination with James Dobson.
It is great to be here on the 40th anniversary of Focus on the Family. Allow me to acknowledge the founder of this ministry, a man who became the author of an enormous body of work that has inspired millions, and he's been a friend and a mentor to me, Dr. James Dobson.
In every article and biography that I've read about Dobson, they describe him as a frail, annoying little pipsqueak, obsessed with his image. Dobson has always been conscious of his image. He won't allow photographers to shoot him from the right side, where his hairline is in rapid retreat, and has been known to halt interviews mid-sentence if a photographer breaks this rule. He really was so insecure that he projected it onto a culture of millions of Christian men, and we're still feeling the ramifications today. So I am officially declaring him Dr. Weenie Hut General. So do you remember how I said we were going to compare Dobson to Jerry Falwell? By now you can probably see why. They both maintained massive spheres of religious influence and had impacts on society that can be seen today. They both wanted to push an agenda that was equal parts religious and social, and sought to live in a society that reflected their conservative views alone. They both also managed to abuse the American tax code, but that goes without saying. So I think it's interesting that the best way to show you who Dobson is might be to highlight that his main difference from Jerry Falwell. Jerry Falwell wanted to win your soul. He wanted to convert you to the side of God, and he had faith in his own charisma to get the job done. Whether you like him or not, and I know I certainly don't, you can't say that he wasn't a confident man. Dobson didn't give a shit about your soul. All he wanted was to tell you what to do. That's why Dobson was interested in getting into the nitty-gritty of American politics. He wanted to pass laws that made people stop doing things he didn't like. Dobson didn't care how you felt about it. You just needed to stop having all that premarital gay sex at any cost. I think this is why Dobson is more dangerous than a lot of other Fundie organizations that we've touched on here. To this day, Focus on the Family and FRC are still well embedded in the scene of Washington dark money. They get people elected, they get bills passed, and they get judges they like appointed to lifetime seats. Dobson's influence is harder to fight too. It doesn't present the same opportunities for social debate that the windbag Jerry Falwell would. If we want to beat Dobson, we're going to have to play his game. I sure hope you guys like this video. I worked hard on it. I don't know how long this is going to be, but I've been recording for 2 hours, so hopefully all my points get across. If you like this video, remember to consensually smash that like and subscribe button. As always, I have my resources in the info box below, as well as makeup and accessories and things like that. I do have merch available, including now the My Love Languages Picnics bag and the Limp Bizkit University mug, as well as this shirt, as well as a million other things. I am really tired, guys. Hit me up on all the social medias. Be good to each other. I love you, and I'll see you in 2 weeks. Yeah, I'll see you sometime. I'll be here. You know where to find me.
And as he grew, he'd say, I'm going to be like you, Dad. You know I'm going to be like you. And the cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon, the little boy blue and the man in the moon. When you coming home, Dad? Well, I don't know when. But we'll get together then, son. You know we'll have a good time then.